Hi, my name's Andrew Greenfield. I'm an IBM Global Engineer. I wanted to say thanks for coming to this particular IBM Tech U. It's my favorite session to deliver. It's called The Future of Flash Technologies, a deeper dive into the future of storage. And yes, we'll be going through all different types of storage, as well as items that are going to affect you and storage in the coming years. Now, I couldn't do my job without the great help of Brian Sherman, Barry White, and Adrian Verdon. You can see their names in the upper right. Brian Sherman is a distinguished engineer at IBM. And Barry White is a master inventor at IBM. They both have sessions here at the Tech U. And Adrian Verdon is with Brocade. By all means, feel free. All of them have great social media presences as well. So feel free to check them out. Now, this presentation will have links at the end. It's available inside the IBM Tech U portal, as well as on my public box link. You'll see that link in front of you in the lower left. Let's go into the next. If nothing else, how about this? The first 5 IBM customers, IBM business partners that email me, andrewjg@us.ibm.com, get their choice of one of these wonderful prizes. Yeah, I want to hear from you, but more importantly, I love giving out free stuff. So please feel free, drop me an email, the first 5. If it's a shirt or a clothing item, I need to know not only your shipping address, not only your phone number, but of course, give me the USA size and 1 prize per customer, please. So by all means, I've got weekend duffels, an analog notebook sealed for your protection, as well as all the clothing items sealed in plastic. I got socks, I got shirts, I got a jacket, and of course I've got batteries and tumblers. We have lots of stuff to choose from. So if nothing else, please feel free. Now let's get into it. The future of memory devices. Now, for those who have seen this presentation before, there's some minor changes, but let's go through them later on in this presentation as well. The biggest changes for 2021, phase change memory and tape. We'll go into those in a little bit. Phase change memory is in the upper right. Take a look at its latency and its density. Yeah, that's right. It's faster than DRAM, and that's why it's really exciting, because if we can go faster, cheaper, or with less power, a lot of things open up to us. And of course, tape. More importantly, cyber resiliency has become the #1 IT topic. Please, if you haven't been considering tape, if you haven't been investing more into tape, you need to do so, and we'll go into that in a little bit as well. Now let's talk about tape. It's not dead. Yes, in 2017, IBM came out with a 330 terabyte tape cartridge. That's right, 330 terabytes. And since then, we've only been improving it, coming soon to the market to 580 terabytes. Now, why is this important? Again, for cyber resiliency, there's no better way and cheaper way to protect your data. The shelf life of tape is easily 50 plus years. It's less than 1 pound, fits in the palm of your hand, and the cost, less than half of 1 cent per gigabyte. That's amazing. So yes, let's take a look a bit more detail at tape, because while it's the slowest, it is definitely the most effective, the best cost effective as well. Now, I don't have reliable 2021 pricing, but there it is. Less than 1 cent, half of 1 of those cents. Now, how do we do this? In case you're familiar, great. Quick little review. At 7 nanometers, we've been able to develop a new spluttered media. That's right, that's what they call it. And tape runs physically over various different heads and rollers. And so because of that physical interaction, we needed to come up with a brand new lubricant. That's right. So not only did we find a better way of spraying the actual magnetic particles, but the lubrication itself had to get better. Because it's going faster, we needed to have even less friction and higher durability for this particular new tape that we came out with. That's outstanding. Here it is in print. Feel free to explore more of those links. Now, hard drives. Not dead. Not dead at all. In fact, in 2021, I do have the reliable figures. We shipped more enterprise class hard drives than the consumer side, as well as, in some cases, better than certain classes of SSDs. 64 million hard drives were shipped just in second quarter of 2021. That's amazing. So please, hard drives aren't dead. They're just definitely shifting more and more into the higher capacity and in terms of the archival space as well. Now, let's talk a little bit also about tape and encryption in the terms of how we're going to secure it. So we've talked about tape being cheap. We talked about how tape uses encryption. But now I need to make sure that we can use quantum encryption to prevent a quantum computer from being able to decipher the standard encryption. So that's right. IBM came out with an open source project called Crystals, which allows us to then start a new standard for quantum level of encryption so that even the best of the computers, and as you know, IBM has quantum computing that's been out for the last couple years, and we have some competitors as well. But that way, when you commit your data to tape, we can commit it in such a way that that encryption can't be broken very easily by a quantum level computer. The links are on this page as well as at the end. But the biggest game changer on encryption that I have for you, because it encompasses all of storage, and not just storage, but how we accomplish it, is what's called fully homomorphic encryption. Try saying that 5 times fast. FHE is the acronym. And basically, why is this such a huge difference? It's not just a different algorithm. It's an entire new process. And if you haven't seen some of my other process videos about malware and ransomware, please do. But here's the key thing. Yes, you can talk to me about encryption at rest. You can talk to me about encryption over the wire, over in transit, whatever you want to do. But the key thing is you still have to normally decrypt to work on the actual data itself. That itself is a risk, and that's where FHE changes it. So not only has IBM come up with a new process, but we've also rolled it out at one of our bigger financials in Brazil, link down below. And where this comes in is that by using this new process, which is going to change applications, we're able to work on the data set without decrypting the data. This is huge. Now, not only do I have this as a video, but also a nice link available for you as well. And that's why I'm going to switch to this particular slide. Take a look. Imagine now like a clean room that you're not able to see inside. So you have your exterior processes that can manipulate the data while it's encrypted and perform any of those actions all without touching it, all without even knowing about it. So we're taking out that last liability. We don't need to necessarily worry about in transit or at rest or even where it's stored because the data itself never has to de-encrypt. The security is never compromised. We have this live on YouTube. Please take a look. It's a game changer, and this is going to be a real improvement in all assets of our lives, namely financials, namely medical as well, because think of those data sets. It's highly secure under compliance issues, and the fact that we can actually change things at the data level without compromising the security layer is incredibly important. Now, how about a chip to tackle some of that? Absolutely. IBM released in the last month a brand new chip called the Telum. It's at 7 nanometers. And of course, there's links to this as well at the end. It has 8 processor cores, each at 5 gigahertz. And each core has 32 megs of a private cache. Now, each one of those caches forms a bigger cache. And that's what you're seeing on the right-hand side, a 256 megabyte virtual cache, as well as another cache as well. Now, why is this important? That way, each of these cores are optimized for AI. Think of it almost like a graphical processor unit on steroids. So each one of these processor cores can access its own private RAM as well as the group RAM to share the data. And what this is going to do is rapidly speed up next-gen workloads and artificial intelligence and various other data warehousing. This is huge. And not only that, because this is going to come out first for our Z and probably Power servers, we're using all of our experience on trusted execution. So this is important because we'll be able to not only secure the actual execution as well as the storage inside at the chip layer itself. Now, this is not a picture of my dentals or anyone else's. This is another big change. Even with COVID, IBM has a 2 nanometer technology. And by the way, for what this is worth, that means it's smaller than our own DNA. You can see that picture on the right-hand side. So this is a 45% performance improvement versus the current standard, which you saw earlier, of the 7 nanometers, like, for example, our tape. So this is going to quadruple a lot of things. You see the first bullet point. That means batteries and your cell phone battery life, speeding up the laptops, as well as quicker processing in the fact that we're able to pack 50 billion transistors into a chip the size of a fingernail. This is huge. So don't be surprised if we're able to take some gigantic leaps forward with this newer technology. So this is across all the various different chips and other storage technologies, and the fact that we have a newer process. Now, I've talked about this before. Let's talk about where it's going. DRAM, or dynamic RAM, is now at 5 nanometers. Now, where we've done a little bit more improvements is the fact of it being capacitorless. Without a capacitor, it allows us to actually provide a better voltage and memory power savings. The only problem, of course, huge expense. This is not off-the-shelf components. We're using some really crazy stuff. Indium gallium arsenide, or InGaAs. And yes, if you want to make jokes, this isn't something you want to express at parties or anything like that. So compliments of our friends in Zurich and Spain. We have some interesting new DRAM coming out. The problem right now is that it's a little bit of a cost issue, but very powerful, and lower voltages gives us some really good hope. Now, we talked about DNA in an earlier slide, but I want to make sure you understand that this has been exposed and talked about even at Star Trek over the years. So way back when, in 2017, we talked about our friends, the Klingons, and how you could store DNA as data, or vice versa, actually. And that's what Science Reality has. I can now store 5.5 petabits in 1 cubic DNA millimeter. That's right. So in 1 cubic millimeter, I can store 5.5 petabits. You're like, wow, that's a credible amount, Andrew. That's a lot better than tape. You're right. It's a lot better than tape. Very dense, very stable, because it can be in inorganic materials that can last forever. However, it's just slow to access, extremely slow. Not tape slow. We're talking a long, long time. Orders of magnitude slower than tape. But on the other hand, the fact that it can be stored longer, don't be surprised if this comes to a theater near you. And yes, various archives and libraries and certain customers are already starting to use some of these technologies to explore it because of its density. It's just not very cheap as tape either. That's the other reason why it hasn't been explored as much. But the density is amazing. Now let's go back to some of the more exciting memory devices. This is going to affect all of storage. It's called phase change, or PCM. Now, compliments of IBM Zurich. Even with COVID, those guys have made some incredible advances in some of their phase change materials. And let's take a look at that and where that fits in. Now, on the upper left-hand part of the first chart on the left side, see where hard drives are, HDDs, SSDs, or solid-state drives. And then, of course, we have PCM, or phase change memory, which is part of 3D XPoint. And then we have the DRAM and SRAM that you might have remembered from the earlier slide. Now remember, 3D XPoint, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is phase change. It's non-volatile, and that's what's really exciting about phase change, and the fact that we can actually hold a charge, hold a value without a constant power supply. But notice what phase change really looks like. So in one particular state, look at C on the lower left, is where it's all jumbled up. But immediately, once we actually crystallize it, it can order, and obviously that can be our 0 or our 1, versus the amorphized state. Try saying that 5 times fast. And that's the key thing. We're always trying to make things faster, better, cheaper. And now let's talk about another memory device coming down the pipe. It's called neuromorphic. That's right. It's phase change. It uses ferroelectrics. And the key thing about this one is different materials. And those materials, again, are not your friends. Barium titanate, as well as hafnium-based zirconium. None of these products you want to put on your skin, inhale, or be anywhere near in some cases. But they are useful, as you take a look, for a state change between 0 and 1, as you can see on the right-hand side. And the key thing about all of this is that by using these currents, we're able to create or alter the barriers to adjust the electrical conductance. And that means we're able to program them as well as store values. Now, let's just review again phase change memory from the most marketable product. That's right, 3D XPoint has been on the market now for a while, actually years, that I've been reporting on this. The key thing about phase change and why it's useful is that it's non-volatile. That's right. So I don't have to supply a constant current to it. It's stackable. It's a lot better endurance. That's right, the write cycles, which, as you know, in other devices, including SSDs, have a problem. We don't have a write cycle or an endurance problem like other NANDs with phase change memory. Now let's talk about another sister to all of this. Spintronics has been around since 1974, and that's part of a lot of other brothers and sisters. That's right, magneto-resistive RAM, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or STT-MRAM is what we like to call it. So the key thing is that we're able to take a look at the actual spin of an electron at the atomic level and then program that for a 0 or 1. Now, why is this important? Well, it's cool that we could actually do this at the atomic level. So we've got the density level. We've got the fact that it can actually survive EMPs, that it's actually endurance, as well as very, shall we say, resilient to exterior problems. The key in this particular slide is that we found some new materials with graphite and graphene. Why is that important? Well, graphite and graphene are very transparent, flexible, thin, as well as a very strong material, if not one of the strongest. The key thing for this is we could use this in automotive, we can use it in bio, as well as we can use it in mobile, so that it's thin, light, and strong and can conduct currents. Now, where is this going? We've seen some immediate bio applications where you could actually wear a sensor that could actually monitor your particular perspiration, your heart rate, your O2, using graphite and graphene. Now, why haven't you seen this in products? Graphite and graphene are notorious for quality issues as well as not being the most abundant. Now, where this is going, STT-MRAM, just to make sure everyone sees what it looks like, take a look at the 0 and the 1 in the center picture, in that free layer. So IBM has been focusing on magnetic tunnel junctions. That's where we're actually storing those values, and we're actually using a transistor. So again, why is this important? Again, it's as fast as DRAM, it can handle writes even better, and it's non-volatile. So this is why magnetic tunnel junction is very important. And as part of that, IBM this year took a huge leap forward with the production by going down to 14 nanometers. That's right. We're now at quantum level of performance. And the fact that, take a look in the center picture here, that's where your MTJ is, or the magnetic tunnel junction is. We've gotten it smaller and more reliable. Take a look at A, B, C, and D, where we used to have copper being a problem, but we are now able to get rid of the copper from the actual production. Now, where does this look like? Take a look at the upper right. You can see those different contacts with the ferromagnets and how they will create a 0 or a 1. And normally, as you can see from the text, normally we have some issues in regular classic physics, but by doing tunnel magnetoresistance, we're able to get a new level of performance as well as a new level of electroconductivity as well as barriers. Now, what does this mean? With newer materials that we just found out, the anti-ferromagnetics, take a look at the slightly different on the lower right-hand side, we're able to survive an EMP, and that's our goal. So using spintronics, or magneto-resistive RAM, and AFM, or anti-ferromagnetics, we're able to take a look at materials that could survive a nuclear blast, electromagnetic pulse. In other words, outside external fields would have no effect. So not only are they fast, not only are they very durable from a write perspective over and over again, not only can they handle a lack of power, the non-volatility, but the survivability with external fields, including a nasty one known as EMP, or the electromagnetic pulse. Now, phase change memory and resistive RAM, or ReRAM, are an important item that I want to discuss next. Now, they're similar to STT, spin transfer torque, or spintronics. The key thing is that instead of the actual electron and its spin value at the atomic level, I'm actually changing the material. Now remember, PCM is what's used in the most marketed version of it, the 3D Crosspoint from Intel. But where we're going next with it, and take a look in the upper right, you'll actually see how small it is at the 200 nanometer scale in D. We're actually changing those zeros and ones by actually changing the material using heat and fast current pulses, which change the material to either crystallize or melt which actually gives us our 0 or a 1. Now, the key thing I want to make sure everyone's aware of is this is, again, a sister to some of the other ones. And ReRAM has a new exciting development, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in the next slide. Coming in 2022, that's right, Skywater Technologies in the United States has signed on to do a ReRAM from Weebit. Now, why is this important? Take a look at the bottom part of this slide here, where it actually is a chip inside a chip. In other words, I've got RAM for instructions, RAM for data, RAM for an array, for I/O, as well as a CPU. Now let's take a look at this in a little bit more detail. ReRAM changes its resistance based on MEM resistors. So it's slightly different technology, but it's still accomplishing the same goal. Now these phase change items, very similar to what we talked about, also includes perovskites, and I'll go into that next. So using these switching materials between two electrodes gives us this chip inside a chip, and it's going to come to a theater near you in the coming year. The question is how well it'll perform in the market for CPU functions as well as array-based functions. Now you're like, perovskite, what are these all about? Now why are these important? It's a class of materials which are similar that actually have superconductive properties, magnetoresistance, and, as you see in the picture, bioluminescence. Now, if you've been watching Star Trek, if you've never even heard of Star Trek, you've seen in science fiction movies how doctors of the future are able to then track cells or infections or organisms by using nanocells. Well, this is science fiction come to science reality. Take a look at this particular picture here. Coming soon in the next few years, we will probably use this class of materials for bio applications, and the fact that we can actually use these nanocrystals and particles to light up key cells and use that in a growing AI environment. So we can actually track them from a humanistic standpoint as well as from a robotic standpoint for a new class of drugs as well as drug interactions. Now, one of the other ones that's maybe stalled, and this is again similar to where we've been before with phase change memory, is now we're going over to carbon and carbon nanotubes. Again, take a look at the picture on the lower left where you can see the 0 and the 1, where I have two electrodes and I'm able to change either between the 0 and the 1. It's faster and denser than DRAM. It's even less energy than SSD. It's even more extreme on the durability side than our friends and phase change. That's why I bring this up now. And it's good up to superheats. Look at that. 300 degrees Celsius. Crazy. The problem is that we haven't had too much more success in the development side. It's still low power, or almost essentially zero power in standby mode. So that's pretty good. It's almost non-volatile, but the fact that it's faster is why it's still on my chart today, because it might be coming to a chip near you. Now, in my presentation, we're moving faster and faster on my little timeline to the more denser, the faster processors, and also the most expensive. Let's give a nod to an IBM fellow who's received numerous awards, where we wouldn't have the computers today without his invention of DRAM, or dynamic RAM. Take a look at the lower left. In 1972, that's what 1 kilobit looked like. And we had 16 of them in the first personal computer. Fast forward to today. That's right. In 2021, IBM was shipping the Z15, the mainframe, and look at how much faster the chip is from its brother before a couple years earlier. More transistors, more cache, able to handle the next generation of crypto, artificial intelligence, and I would even argue the next generation workloads to help power some of our massive industries in the world. Why is this important? Because by using some of those earlier processes, the 7 nanometer process as well as the 14 nanometers, you're going to see even more dense chips coming out of IBM as well as our other vendor suppliers. Okay, let's move into a little bit more Hollywood-esque. That's right, in 2012, IBM demonstrated, at the time, the smallest possible storage. That's right, at the atomic layer. We used 12 atoms for a single bit, and we're able to animate this. Now, what does that look like? Take a look on the right-hand side, that it was very dense than even the fastest SRAM or DRAM, let alone NAND at the time. That's crazy. So that's part of the reason why we talked about spintronics, we talked about phase change, we talked about some of the other newer nanometer processes. So take a look at where we're coming finally to the cost, speed, as well as longevity at the atomic layer. Now, what does this look like? No problem. Not only do I have the slide that details this, I've got the link on the slide, and take a look at the end of this presentation. You can actually bring this up on YouTube as well. The key thing is that in this movie, it demonstrates that we were able to move every single atom, the smallest particle, as storage. And now, to put that thread, the fact that each particular atom, we're able to change its electron spin represents the huge change of what spintronics really represents. That we're able to take this to a next level, the actual electronic spin of the atom itself rather than the atom as a whole. Now let's get to my favorite part of the presentation, talking about holograms and holographic storage. I can't tell you how many movies I've seen where it's a crystal that the hero or the villain has that has massive amounts of data and it has the key to the entire plot. So yes, the good news is that this is being used today inside Microsoft's Azure cloud. It's fabulously expensive. That's why you haven't seen it at a local grocery store or your favorite electronic superstore. The key thing about it is that it's very dense. That's right, up there with our tape. It's also very useful from a reliability standpoint. So long term, it can store that data very, very well without worrying of degradation or corruption. We're using light, and that's right, ultraviolet light, to erase and re-record. The key thing about it is it's not very fast at all, so it's far slower than tape, and it's also a lot longer lasting because of the materials inside the crystal itself. That's the good news. Now let's talk about something else that can't be left off the table. Everything else in this presentation focused on individual devices, but we need to communicate between those devices. I can't think of a better way than Fibre Channel. It has been an industry leader for a long time, and take a look at its roadmap. It has a rich runway ahead of it. Right now, Gen 7 is starting to ship in limited quantities, 64 gigabits per second, and even more when you actually have more than one lane, of course. What does that really mean? Take a look. NVMe, you've heard about before. It's a great new technology that takes existing Fibre Channel as well as Ethernet and make it even faster for the application. Great. But what happens when I have Gen 7 Fibre Channel and I can reduce the latency? That's the key point of what I'm highlighting here. When I can, on Fibre Channel, reduce the latency, I can go even faster in the same physical framework. That's right, using your existing cables, using your existing applications, I can actually make it go even faster. So don't be surprised with Gen 7 HBAs, switches, as well as optics that we're able to take your existing applications and make them go even faster. And what does that really mean? Take a look at this chart, which shows where Fibre Channel is going. So I've got 64 gigabit that's starting to ship today. And look, I'm going to double that, if not quintuple it, in the next couple of years. Outstanding. Don't be surprised that Fibre Channel has a longer life for those who like to think it's going into the graveyard. Now, how are we doing this? Whether you're Brocade, whether you're Cisco, all of them on the Gen 7 are using a lot more intelligent ASICs as well as intelligence inside the chassis to handle bad packets or badly behaved traffic. Now on the Brocade side, we have a self-healing SAN where even if it's NVMe packets, we can move packets off the superhighway as well as having different lanes for different traffic and prioritizing that traffic as well. And let's talk about prioritizing that traffic. By using Brocade's Traffic Optimizer, they will actually take a look at your entire network, older devices as well as your newest devices, and give them individual lanes to make sure that each particular application or classification of traffic gets the most amount of performance that it can sustain without degrading anyone else. And in case something starts degrading, it can be moved off that lane, just like you saw in the prior slide, to an off-ramp so that the rest of your infrastructure continues at its peak performance. Brocade's got many other great features. feel free to reach out to me or your local Brocade or IBM rep to talk about some of those. And now let's go on to Cisco. In a very similar way, Cisco has a lot of great features as well on their Gen 7. Notably, the last one on the right, DIRL, or Dynamic Ingress Rate Limiting. Now, the key feature that they like to tout on this is they're going to look at the actual port on the switch independent of the HBA to try to weed out bad traffic or poorly behaved devices. So that's the key difference here. None of this could be possible without a great tool. So while we've talked about futures, I want to make sure you understand that going forward, you should still use existing tools. Now, Brocade, for the last 12 years, has had a fantastic SAN tool that works both on Cisco devices as well as their own Brocade switches. And it not only plots out performance, not only highlights key deficiencies, but also gives you a nice visio of your entire network, all in a great zip. The links at the end of this presentation. Please, if you haven't been using this tool, I highly recommend you start doing so. And it's the key to your future SAN performance. Brocade has made this tool free for over 12 years, and since it runs on both Brocade as well as Cisco, you have no excuse not to run it. Less than 10 minutes of your life, and you'll be able to improve your network. And speaking of which, let's talk about Cisco. That's why I'm even focusing on these tools. Because Cisco just this year released their SAN Insights Discovery tool. They didn't have this before. It runs on both Brocade as well as Cisco. It's free. So if you want to run both tools, feel free. You now have a native Cisco tool as well as a native Brocade tool, and you can cross-check each other. Same thing before. To squeeze the maximum amount of performance out of your existing infrastructure as well as any of your futures, by all means, you need to use the right tools, and this is one of the best ways to do it. Thanks again for watching this. It means a lot to me. My email's on screen as well as the public box link and my YouTube channel in case you want to go into a deeper dive on any of this. And I'd encourage you, please feel free to reach out to me, not only for the prizes, but if you want to go in a deeper dive on any of the storage or SAN technologies, as well as improving your existing ecosystem. Last but not least, please do the session evaluation. It lets my managers as well as my upper chain know how I'm doing as well as improving myself.